Hi, everyone. We are Ada and Abigail, the creators of DEVONthink for historians. And over the last several months, maybe weeks, maybe even over a year, several of our students have mentioned the Zettelkasten method to us and how it can be used with DEVONthink. And those conversations and emails and questions that we've received have inspired this video. So in this video, we're going to review what is the Zettelkasten method, why it may or may not be for you, how you can use some of the concepts and apply it into DEVONthink as well. And then at the end of the video, we'll discuss this new concept that we're referring to as evolutionary sifting, a fun phrase that describes how Abigail and some of our students that have purchased our courses approach research. Perhaps you approach research in the same way, and we'll talk about how it's related to Zettelkasten and a bit different. So Abigail, let's start at the beginning. What is the Zettelkasten method?
So Zettelkasten is a method of note-taking, first and foremost, and it's one that was designed to allow the Zettelkasten creator to connect ideas into a web of knowledge. There are a lot of great Zettelkasten resources on the internet that can do a much better job of getting into the details than I can. But one helpful resource, which is zettelkasten.de, and we'll have that link below, describes it as a holistic method on how to deal with the knowledge in your life. So a lot of researchers use Zettelkasten as a personal tool for thinking and writing. It has hypertextual features that help to make a web of thought possible. And the difference between Zettelkasten and other systems is that you create a web of thoughts instead of just notes of arbitrary size and form. You're emphasizing connection, not just the collection of random thoughts.
Yes, I love that. So in a very big picture, it's this system that helps you organize all of this information that you're collecting. It's very relevant to historians' workflow that we talk about in our course, because you have to collect all this information before you do something with it. That sort of inputting and outputting phases, as we have talked about it in the past. Right. So Zettelkasten is a way to help you process the information. And so why do you think it's a useful method, or why would someone be interested in using it?
Yeah, so first and foremost, our brains have a limited capacity to hold information. I mean, we all have met these people with remarkable elephant-like memories, but that certainly isn't the case for me, right? Yeah. And I think most people would relate to the feeling of having a limitation on the amount of recall that they have. Sure. So Zettelkasten is a structured format for recording and organizing information that, it sort of starts from that principle that this is more than we can hold in our head, and we need a structure and a method of organizing so that we can come back to this information and make sense of it in the future. Our brains also aren't particularly great at creating hierarchies and networks when we have a lot of information. So that's like the core, the next step. Okay, so we're not good at holding the information. And then also, once we have a certain amount of information, we're not really very good at making sense of it. Right. And so Zettelkasten also includes starts from the assumption that we need a way to visualize relationships, hierarchies, networks within the information we're working with. So really, Zettelkasten is a step-by-step way to take many disparate bits of knowledge and make connections between them in a way that allows the Zettelkasten creator to easily use the information for whatever purpose they are. We're often talking about research and writing. So
right. Awesome. And this method is many decades. I don't know if I have the exact date actually of when it was officially established, but it's been around well before computers, and was initially implemented via paper. But now we have computers and we have software like DEVONthink that we can use to implement Zettelkasten. So let's chat a little bit about like how we've spoken about DEVONthink in our videos and obviously in our courses. We talk about databases, we talk about documents. How could that relate to Zettelkasten?
Yeah, so first of all, when the word Zettelkasten is basically synonymous with DEVONthink's database, right? So Zettels are the individual notes, and the Zettelkasten is like a database. It's the vessel that all of this information will live within.
For sure.
So in DEVONthink, you can basically think of a single database being your Zettelkasten,
Right.
and you can create individual digital Zettels or note files in DEVONthink. So what are the advantages of that? You save paper, so you're not storing, so it's easier to store, right? You don't have like all of those boxes of note cards. I remember in high school, I'd have Spanish vocabulary flashcards I'd keep in these plastic boxes. You don't need those plastic boxes.
Definitely.
What? Or the note
or
cards.
The note cards.
Right. Neither. You need neither. DEVONthink has an integrated tagging function, so you don't need to write your individual tags onto these paper note cards. And DEVONthink's files are text searchable, that handy Control F that you're used to using to search a document, that same functionality is available in DEVONthink. You can scream into your filing cabinet as loudly as you want, and that word will not return to you. There's just no comparable functionality on paper.
For sure.
So you can absolutely replicate the Zettelkasten method in DEVONthink with some even added advantages to doing the analog method.
Right.
You can also, once you have these individual Zettel files, you can link them not only using tags, but also by organizing them into groups and folders. What DEVONthink calls groups, we tend to refer to them as folders, kind of falling back on both the Windows nomenclature and also the idea of the archival folder. Right. But yes, this is DEVONthink calls them groups. So you can organize them into groups, or you can use wiki links, sort of hyperlinks between different Zettels to create connections. And also DEVONthink allows you to input many different kinds of metadata, which you can also get very sophisticated and quite granular in how you use the metadata to create these connections and linkages. But you really shouldn't have to get down to that level, though it's available to you. Yeah. So so definitely the TLDR, you can use DEVONthink to do Zettelkasten.
For sure. And think of your database as the Zettelkasten. So if you're already using Zettelkasten and thinking about moving to DEVONthink, the language would be database, as well as vice versa. If you're familiar with DEVONthink and interested in Zettelkasten is the database. And then your individual notes, sometimes in the course we refer to them as annotations. Those would be the Zettels. And I think one of the interesting points about the Zettelkasten method, from my understanding as I've been learning about it, compared and its implementation in DEVONthink, is the focus of having an individual thought, an individual kind of thought or idea is a note in and of itself. And so that might be something that resonates with some people. It might not be. A little foreshadowing of where we're going with that. But so I think that's an interesting point to be aware of, that you have individual thoughts and notes that are linked together. So you have lots and lots of these digital notes in DEVONthink. Yeah. So perhaps that was a lot of foreshadowing for what we wanted to talk about next. Do you need to use these Zettels? Do you need to use Zettelkasten? If it works for you, perhaps not. If it's something that you resonate as you're going through your research process and you like this idea of capturing individual thoughts and linking them back or grouping them, identifying them in some way, then using the Zettelkasten method might be really great for you. But maybe it's not necessary. As Abigail mentioned, there's all these different additional features that software like DEVONthink provides to you that screaming into your filing cabinet or your stack of cards would not provide, in terms of text searchable, things that are replicable and linkable. So maybe you don't need to take up all of that digital space by having a unique note or unique annotation for each and every thought. So I think it's really up to you. What are your thoughts, Abigail? Anything to add on them?
Yeah, so I have never found the Zettelkasten method particularly compelling, because the way I tend to approach my argumentation, narrative building, writing is not by linking together individual thoughts. It's more so by linking together individual archival sources or groups of archival sources or secondary sources. And so for me, it's much handier to keep all of my thoughts related to a single source together with that source. So, for example, if you have a journal article, a book chapter, or a meaty archival document, that might yield tons of ideas or thoughts that might, in the Zettelkasten method, each be its own Zettel.
Yep.
My preference is to put all of those ideas together into a linked annotation file that keeps all of those thoughts digitally tied to where those thoughts came from, the origin document. So now you might say, okay, but now, one document and all of these multiple thoughts might be related to different lines of argumentation, different narratives,
right,
different uses that you intend. Okay, that's legit. Often I'll use a single source in multiple different ways.
Sure.
But within that single linked annotation file where you've put all of those thoughts, you can also add, using DEVONthink, hyperlinks to individual lines of text that will link you to other documents, other annotation files, other files where you're keeping notes or writing. You can also replicate a single source into multiple groups, so that if one document is related to multiple topics you're writing about, your markup and your notes will show up in all of those folders, and anytime you make changes from one location, it will be replicated in another location. You can also use tagging for this purpose. You can put as many tags as you want on a document, and when you are ready to write about sectarian violence or urban renewal or individual agency, whatever the topic is, you sort, you go to that tag and you open up all of the related documents, and that document and those ideas will appear
right
there all together, regardless of whether it's as an individual thought or part of an aggregation of multiple thoughts related to a document.
Exactly.
I also would argue that your note-taking process doesn't really end until the product you're creating is finished.
Great.
And so rather than continuing to generate many of these Zettels, I'd rather have one place where I continue to iterate, think, marinate, ideate on a source. Right? Yeah, it just, to me, that feels less chaotic, right, and more traceable. It makes more sense to me. But that's the way my brain works.
Right. All right. And I think that that's such a powerful point, and it's probably why, well, I think it's definitely why we have a whole section in our course that talks about the historian's workflow and really encourages people to think about how does your brain work? How do you want to approach these things? So you can, if your brain works more with a Zettelkasten type approach, that's awesome. There are ways that you can learn that method and implement that method in DEVONthink. And if your brain works in a different way, that's great. There are ways that you can define that process for you and implement that process in DEVONthink to help you become a more, to make the research process more efficient and hopefully more enjoyable. So I think that's one of the big points I hope everyone that's watching this gets away from this video, is that there are lots of methods. You can create your own method, and to really get in touch with how your brain works can help you navigate that process. But the process that you just finished discussing, your process, was described using the phrase evolutionary sifting by one of our fantastic DEVONthink for Historians students, Jim Tobin. So thank you very much, Jim, for introducing that phrase to us. We have adored it since, since he shared it with us. And it really does describe that ongoing process of I get so excited I get tongue tied, referring back to your documents, referring back to your sources, and going through them and updating your notes and refining your notes until you're done with your writing.
Yeah, so I have found over and over again that the first time I encounter a source, usually that's within the archive or a library, and time is of the essence. And I'm really just reading to understand what the document is, what the book, what the journal is, and how it relates to the topic I'm interested in. So it's a more superficial review. And in my notes at that time, like if I decide it's relevant and I scan it or I download it and import it into my database, the notes I'm taking are very superficial. We'll say something like, this is about or related to X topic, and I think I will use it in this way in the future. That's also when I'll put some preliminary tags on it, and I'll move it into the appropriate folder or group in my database. Later, I'll read it a second time, and that's when I have an eye towards a certain use for it, whether that's a paragraph or an argument that I'm constructing. That's when I'll take much more detailed notes. Okay. Who is the author? Why did they write it? What are their, what are the major points made in this? How does it relate in more detail to the project that I'm working on? Finally, when I go to write, I'm looking at that source again. And that's when I'm interrogating it. I'm looking for silences. I'm looking for omissions. I'm looking to understand any limitations of the source. I'm also, hoping to see the best way to use it in the narrative or argument that I'm actively writing. So I will often add some final notes at that point too. And this is what I've just described is the evolutionary sift. I would rather personally keep all of that sifting together in one document that's iterative and additive, continuing to add tags and links and notes as I go, rather than, as I said, creating a new Zettel for every individual idea or thought that arises from that source. And that's my personal preference.
Right. And I love it. I love the insight that you provided by going through each time and sharing what you're looking at for the document each time. I think in some ways my background is like, oh my God, you're touching the same document 3 times, inefficient. Sort of my alarm bells are going off. But it's actually not, because each time you look at the document, you're looking at it from a different perspective, and you're integrating a collection of the things that you've learned the first time through when you look at it the second time through, and likewise the third time through. So it really is a lovely process that you have. And I just love that you've refined it so that it works for you. And I think that's the big message. I'm sure I've said it multiple times in this video, is that we wish for you to do you in your research process. So if Abigail's methods, named by Jim, thank you so much, works for you and you will adopt this evolutionary sifting, then that's great. If Zettelkasten is something that you've used before, that you're interested in using in the future, then that's great. If you find something that's your particular method, feel free to share it with us in the comments. Or if you're already a student, reach out to us via the course platform. And if you are interested, I do want to mention again, if you are interested in Zettels and Zettelkasten, check out zettelkasten.de. The link is in the description. We both have really enjoyed it as a resource. And if you're interested in getting some more tips about DEVONthink, how you can use DEVONthink for the historian's workflow, or if you're doing any sort of writing and collecting of primary and secondary sources, check out our course. You can find it at DEVONthinkforhistorians.com. And then always, we always like to end with our sort of YouTube requests. If you are, we have so many fabulous subscribers and we're both very grateful to all of you that are our subscribers. But if for any chance you have not subscribed to our channel yet, please do hit subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you'll see when we post new videos like this. And hitting the like button also helps other people find the video when they're searching the internet for DEVONthink workflows and all sorts of interesting stuff that and Zettelkasten apparently for this video. So thank you so much for watching. Any last things, Abigail?
No, I just echo what you said. I really hope this is helpful, and yeah, we will hang out in the comments section if you follow-up questions or want to know more from us.
For sure, definitely. And as I mentioned in the introduction, this video and so many of our videos are always inspired by comments and questions that we receive for people that find our course or take our course. And it's really great. So if you have questions or comments, don't hesitate to reach out and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. All right, have a great day.